Welcome everyone to our today's webinar of Searchmetrics. Today we want to talk about personas, what personas are and why they're useful for your content creation or the strategy development. Yeah, and your host today is Michael. Michael, I'm the team leader of the Content Services Department within Searchmetrics and the Searchmetrics Digital Strategies Group. And with me today is Marlene.
Hi everyone, I'm Marlene. I'm also working with the team in Content Services, and yeah, I've been with Searchmetrics for 5 years and always in content.
Yes. Okay, I already mentioned the DSG. The DSG is an integrated consultancy within Searchmetrics. We are a team of content strategists, content marketers, SEO consultants, and data scientists. And we try to unlock the mysteries of online performance for our clients since 2005. And our goal or our vision is to lead innovation in search and content. And we offer a variety of different services, starting, of course, with SEO consulting, one of our core competencies, based on or focused on technical SEO, and of course, strategic consultancy and content marketing services. In our client base is basically quite broad, I would say. We don't have an industry focus. So we do everything from like AIDA to Z to Zalando. But I would say that's enough from the self-promotion. Let's start with the webinar for today, and I would hand it over to Marlene.
Yep. So we're going to start or keep for a moment on the topic of advertising. So everybody knows it's like whenever you walk around, look around, wherever you're going, and like advertising, you're bombarded by advertising. Like it doesn't matter if you're like offline, for example, like waiting at a bus stop or looking at billboards, or if you're online, like reading an article, or even when you're in an app. Like every time there are so many advertisements screaming basically at you. So the number of advertising messages varies actually between 4,000 and 10,000 every day. So that's quite a lot. Like, how can you, for a company, you might wonder, like, how can I be, seen there in that bulk? One problem is that a lot of clients, or a lot of not clients, a lot of companies, not our clients, of course. A lot of companies produce irrelevant content, and that, of course, is content that will not reach your target group. So that means a lot of companies produce content, and that is of no interest of their target audience. And that can be because the topic is off, or because it's not customized to the target audience, or various customer touch points, which means it's in the wrong channels. Like you're not following you not know where your clients are, your target group is. So that actually comes down to 3 out of 4 B2B customers think businesses need to better understand their needs. So this is another Mercator study where it sees there's definitely a lack of understanding on the company side for their clients, which is very critical, because you leave out a lot of potential to get in touch with your client, make them not only aware of you, but also get in a dialogue with them and kind of bind them to your company. So, and here's an example why it does make sense to kind of intensely study your target group, because according to a study conducted by Google, relevant videos ads get 3 times more user attention from videos. So that's a lot. So this is why it does make sense to investigate the time and money to kind of look out and for your target group and build, to come later, to personas. So what we like to call it is like our motto is less noise, more impact, which means, as we have just heard the number of 4,000 to 10,000 messages every day, like it's like most of the time this is right, like quality over quantity. Like if you want to do something, then first of all, study your target group and align your messages to where, first of all, you find them, where they are, the touch points, and then, of course, also what they're looking for. Like they have a precise need, they're looking for something, they need information, they need to find a problem. So give them what they need, and then you can convert them into a client of yours.
Yes, and then in the end, of course, have more impact. So it's like focus rather, like you said, rather on the quality rather than the quantity. It's like produce less, but more relevant, more important content. And you already mentioned it, how like to focus on the needs and the interests of our target audience. So a persona is quite a good tool how to do that, because a persona is basically a fictional character who represents a specific segment of your target audience. And it includes characteristics like, for example, interests, challenges, goals, wishes, media consumption, relevant touch points, whatsoever. So a lot of relevant data that you can use, or relevant information that you can use for your content production, your setup of the strategy, etc., etc. But the most important part, or one of the important parts, is while creating the personas, you need to have segments that are large enough to enable a specific communication. Of course, you could have a large target audience and create individual, like really fragmented personas, but of course the value won't be that high. So you need to focus that the persona or the segments are large enough to enable specific communication and are clearly separate from one another. So this is something you always should keep in mind. And we were already mentioning target audiences. And for example, a target audience, I mean, most of us know them, or all of us, I would say, know target audience. They're quite generic, one-dimensional, I would say. So we have like one example focusing on demographics. For example, a streaming provider. The target group could be 14 to 42 years old, male and female, maybe UK resident. But you don't know anything about the interests, about the hobbies. For example, for a streaming provider, it could be interesting. Is it like someone who likes to binge watch TV shows, or who is more into horror movies or rom-coms or whatsoever? So you have like topic related personas that you can focus your communication on. On the other side, for example, in B2B sector, self-employed people, like freelancers in the UK, like even the freelance industry, or not industry, but the freelancers are quite diversified. You have consultants, for example, that work at the clients, or you have salesmen that are always on the move, making primarily calls, have to make appointments, traveling from A to B. But on the other side, you have brick and mortar shops, e-commerce shops, where safety and security is quite important. So the characteristics of like self-employed people are quite diverse, and even the needs of the people. So you see, okay, on first hand, of course, you have the demographics, but you can dig deeper and get a better feeling for your target audience that's focusing on characteristics, interests, etc., etc. And additionally, for example, the study also from Google says that if you only focus on demographic characteristics, you miss out of 70% of the mobile shoppers, because you only consider the demographics and not, for example, the interest, search intent, etc., etc. So in the end, personas help you to get a better feeling about your target audiences. Like I said before, it's like, what are the challenges? What are the interests? So you identify relevant characteristics that describe and distinguish the different personas. You get a better feeling about them. And by doing that, you maximize existing potential and identify new opportunities. So you see, okay, now you have a good feeling what the interests and needs of your persona are, and then you can see, okay, how can I fulfill those needs and interests? Is there something I can do with my existing communication, like how to adapt something, like some parts, or are there like new opportunities I can use to optimize my communication at the end of the day? And so you adapt and optimize your communication according to the specific requirements. So you focus more individually on the different personas. And in the end of the day, I mean, you create a value, of course, for the personas. So you help them achieve their goals, like with their struggles, for example, or try to offer this kind of communications they want, and help them with the content they need, basically. And of course, it adds value to your business as well, because if you're relevant for the target audience, then of course they will engage with you, and in the end, it will increase your sales. And we have one example that from our point of view shows quite well how this could be seen in the communication.
Yeah, so our example is Dove and the campaign Real Beauty, which they kind of started in 2004 and kept ever since. So they came a long way from, of course, also having testimonials like stars or beautiful women and spotless women. And then they thought, well, who's our target group? And they kind of sat together and kind of figured out who are their clients and how the client does want to be talked to. And so they kind of came up with this Real Beauty, and that these are women who are just like me and you. So they started to go very, very different way, like for example, L'Oreal or I don't know, other big beauty companies. And they kind of put on the spot, like, you don't need to have these, they recognize that every person is unique and has unique needs, and everybody wants to be talked to on that level as well. Like, that doesn't mean like you have to have a persona for each woman, like different hair type or whatever, but that you have different set of people who have a unique and needs, and that you need to address in order to talk to them and get in a dialogue with them. So it's are you wrinkled or wonderful? Are you gray or are you gorgeous? Are you flawed or flawless? So this is a very good campaign to show like they totally got away from what is used in that market and tried a total different approach for communication, and it worked out really well. And for example, also with the hair tips that they have a huge, very long holistic page on that for every different kind of hair type you can imagine. That doesn't mean that like every type of them is a persona, but it's just they understood like their differences, and we have to make them, have to address them. So in order that people feel talked to.
Yeah, and the good thing about this example is because we showed in the beginning these big adverts, so they use it as for the ATL communication by focusing on the different types of women. So there's huge identification potential for the target audiences, and they have an extension on the website as seen here with a lot of helpful content. For example, here in that case, hair tips, but they have it for skin and the different skin types, hair types as well. So you have, you use that kind of communication as an awareness trigger, and in the end as like really helpful content as well.
Right. And so now we have heard a lot about why a persona is important and show you a good example. But of course, now we want to know like where do we start? I think that's one of the biggest parts. And then we have like 5 steps how to build a persona.
Yeah, we try to break it down into 5 steps how to create a persona. So the first step, of course, is define the relevant components. So what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? What kind of characteristics, attributes do you need to know about your persona? And the second step, quite obvious, is gather all the data and information. So there are different sources you can use. Some more relevant for ones, some less relevant for the others, but we want to give you an overview about these as well. The third step is to structure the data and information, because at this step you probably gathered a lot of information, then you need to structure it within different clusters like it's the step before you create the persona, which comes next to create the persona and make it as authentic and real as possible. And I would say the most important step is to use the persona, because it's not about creating personas. In the end of the day, it's a tool that you use to improve your communication, your products, whatsoever. But let's dive into the different steps. So start with the first one, define the relevant components. So I'm a big fan of first, because I mean, each company, each business is different. And every responsible person for the marketing or for the definition, for the communication, knows the target group quite well. And so you're able to define different clusters. So like it's a first step, you define clusters as a starting point. For example, as we already mentioned, demographic data, so classic target groups or target audiences. For example, in B2B, the job position could be quite helpful or a good starting point. In another industry, it could be the age or the region where you live, whatsoever. But also, for example, as we've seen in the case of Dove, physical attributes can be quite helpful as a starting point as well. So are we talking to women with gray hair, women with curly hair? So there's potential as well. Or on the other side, for example, interests, like what kind of hobbies? Is like, are you more into bodybuilding or are you more into, I don't know, what else is there? Football, something like this, or even like the streaming providers, like more horror movies or binge watching. And okay, I already mentioned that the hair type could be an example. So one persona could, or a starting point, a cluster could be curly hair, straight hair, dyed hair. On the other side, if you're, for example, a travel company, it could be like business travel, day trips, weekend trips. But this is not like the persona, it's only the starting point. For example, the weekend trips, you could dig deeper and then see, okay, what kind of people are doing business weekend trips? On one side, it could be students visiting their families. On the other side, it could be, for example, the grandma visiting their families as well, or like people going to a city to visit a city. So you already have like 3 different types, but as we mentioned, it's only a starting point. And then, of course, you need to find more attributes or information that you want to use. I mean, we already talked about demographics. Then, for example, the communication behavior and how they access information is quite important as well. I mean, one persona could be, or one person is more the person who picks up the phone and talks to someone on the phone. The other one is someone who goes into Google and researches something. And the other one is maybe, I don't know, likes to talk to people and ask one of his peer groups and what is the best whatsoever. And third, of course, touch points and media consumption. So it's like Instagram more relevant than Facebook or mailing. So what kind of touch points are relevant for the persona? And yeah, purchasing habits, for example. Is your target audience or the persona, is it more a brick and mortar shopper? Does they have one shop where they go? Do they switch online shops? Like this can also, like everything can influence your target audience and in the end of the day, the persona. Interest, hobbies, I think it's quite clear. Challenges, needs. So for example, like even, especially in B2B, if you want to talk to someone in a certain position, so what are his daily challenges? How can we help them to face those challenges, for example? And on the other side, personal characteristics. I mean, we already talked about Dove. The goals, daily routines can be quite helpful to get a feeling how your persona, how the habits are and what they do. So how do they get up? How do they have a daily routine, which is like similar every day, or is it like always different? Are they always on the road, for example, different city? And especially in B2B, it's maybe not the whole day, but the working hours. So with what kind of people do they have in contact? Do they have report to? So this is also quite important. And last but not least, of course, the attitudes toward the brand or the product. So do they know your company? Do they know the brand? What is the attitude? Are they positive, negative? Did they ever have contact with it? So as you can see, there are a bunch of different relevant information that you can use. So the first step is like really try to get a feeling about your target audience and try to create those rough clusters and try to ask yourself, okay, what are the informations I really need to improve my communication? And it can be totally different. That's why it's hard to give like a template. So I would never do that. Just here you have a template and then just fill it out. These are the relevant parts, but you need to do it individually. I mean, a challenge, and it's maybe a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. Regarding templates, I already said I'm not a big fan, but we brought like a small one where you can see how it can look like. I mean, just Google personas and you find tons of them. And in the end, take those that are more suitable for you and you can work with. But it's more important that the information in there are relevant for your everyday work or for your business as well. So, of course, you should integrate a photo. I'm a big fan of a statement which summarizes the persona and gives a quote about, for example, the business or about the characteristics, like the certain characteristic of those persona. Short description is always helpful. So describe the context, give an overview about the Touchpoint media, and like I said, for example, goals or how they access information is also helpful. Yes, so now hopefully after step 1, we defined what kind of information we need. So let's go to step 2, which is gather all the data and information. So there are definitely a bunch of sources that you can use. We try to cluster it a little bit. So the most important one, so if you get the chance to talk to your customers or to some of your potential target audience, try to talk so conduct a survey, do an interview, like online, offline, doesn't really matter. But those are, I would say, the informations that are most relevant. But also you can talk to internal stakeholders, for example, your sales team, your customer services. So that kind of person who are in direct contact with your customers. And as I mentioned before, of course, you can do it online or offline. So step 2, or another source, is social listening. I mean, today or nowadays, we have tons of different social media channels and other channels that you can look into and dig into and try to find and gather some information about your target audience. For example, if you have a Facebook page, go on the comment section, see if you post something, how are the reactions? Is it positive, negative? What are the people writing? And even, for example, in Twitter, you can, people tag you, what are they writing about? So what are their concerns? Are they happy? Is it a shout out or whatsoever? But to try to look at the comments and try to integrate it in your content persona creation process. And also, of course, you can use the social listening tool. There are a bunch of tools where you can track different, like all the stuff I mentioned before. If people talk about your brand or, for example, a topic, you can track that and you can gather the information as well. And as well, blogs and forums. Like if you have, I mean, the example of DAF, for example, I mean, you have, I would say, tons of beauty blogs and forums where you can dig into and see what are the challenges of your target audiences, like what are the real questions people ask. So what are their everyday struggles, I would say. And another source could be product reviews. I mean, for example, go to Amazon if you have a product or a brand and see if you sell on Amazon, of course. But this is quite helpful. Like, what do the people think of your product? Are they happy? Are they not happy? So, as you can see, even in the social or in the digital world, there are tons of good sources for information. And step 3, desk research. I mean, a lot of people already did an analysis about something, try to research it. And if you find something, try to gather like relevant information out of there. There are Sigma and Sinus milieus where you can start your creation and you can base your persona on. And last but not least, of course, data. So use the data of your CRM. Use Google Analytics, use the searches within your website. So what are the people looking for on your website? What are the categories, the products that have the highest click, the best performance, or the least, and try to find out why. And you can also conduct a keyword analysis. We will come to that later. And use Google Suggests. We brought an example for this as well. And even you can use the Google Search Console. So what are the keywords? What are the queries people are coming to your website? And you can try to enrich your personas or the data with those kind of data. And I already mentioned the statistics. I mean, like I said, there are tons of statistics that you can use. For example, in this one, it's like the travel behavior of the German audiences in that case. So what do Germans like to do while traveling? What kind of activities do they like to do? So we have first, visiting cultural and historical sites. Second, nature and walks. So you could use that to create a persona, to enrich a persona. For example, more the people who go to cities and like to visit attractions, or the other ones who go to nature and try to be in the nature, do walks and go hiking, for example. So as you can see, there are good indicators to form those kind of personas. Yes, and next, keyword research. A couple of weeks ago, Felix, our colleagues Felix and Lucas did a webinar on how to create a persona with the help of keywords. So we stole a couple of their slides. And what they did a keyword research on the mobile phone sector, and they clustered the different queries. For example, then we have a cluster with deals, with insurance, contracts, cheap price, best comparison. So you can see these are topics that people are looking for, and you can try to enrich or build your persona on those kind of topics, or you enrich your personas or clusters with those topics as well. And not only like those topics, but also, for example, demographic characteristics. You can filter the search, the keyword research for elderly people, and then you can see, okay, mobile phones for elderly people. So this could be another relevant persona that you can use in your set whatsoever. And also, what I mentioned before, Google Suggest can be quite helpful. So because these suggestions are based on what are people typing in there. So these are like real questions in the end of the day people are having, and you can help them to answer. Okay, so now you gathered all the information. And step 2, it's about structure. And as I mentioned before, you start with the different clusters, with some clusters, and then within the process, you can see, maybe I need one more cluster, or maybe I can delete this one. And this basically, in this step, you also do that. So you check all the data you have, you remove irrelevant information, you try to establish which information or insights are important for you, and try to refine those clusters and the data you have. And maybe add further relevant information to the data you already gathered. So that you have, in the end of this step, good refined set of information and data to create your personas, which is the next steps.
Right. So we have, of course, the next step would be to create the personas. So from all the clusters information, the insights we have generated, like, for example, daily routines, needs, interests, media consumption, we all put that in the template that we have shown you before. So in order to make the persona as authentic and realistic as possible, because now we have somebody to talk to. It's not like we don't know anymore who we're talking to and just spreading some random information. We have, as we named him, Conrad Carpenter, because that's also always important to give your personas like a photo and a catchy name, because then it kind of comes to life. So then you really envision this person when you're doing a marketing campaign or a strategy. Like, you're talking now to Conrad Carpenter, and you see what's interesting for him, what's important for him. Like, for example, you look at his topics, which are important for him. We had before the example of mobile communication. So we see like he wants robust smartphones, and he has not so much, he has some online touch points where we could reach him. So you get a lot of information. You have to kind of align your strategy to that. And as Michael has mentioned before, like, try to give them a statement, which we have here. It's like, I need things that work. I'm not interested in gimmicks. So you know already a lot about that person, like about his likes and dislikes and what he needs. So now you have a very, very clear picture in your head when you're talking to someone. And that's basically what you're doing. You're trying to talk to someone and trying to get him in a dialogue with you, and then kind of at the end get along the user journey. So that's the first step. And then the next one is, as Michael already said, is now that we have created that persona, the most important step is like, not be happy about creating it and say, like, done, he's alive. No, now comes the most important part. You have to use it, like along the user journey. So you have created to identify areas of potential where you could get in contact with the persona. So you see the awareness and the information, where you can get in touch with that person, where you can get his attention, and then you kind of because before you have analyzed his daily routine and you know which touch points you possibly have. So use them, and so that you get into the phase where he considers you as a brand, and where he considers you as not only as a brand, but to buy something for you. So that in the end, he buys something, and he hopefully becomes a loyal client, which is like if he feels like you understood him fully, like you understood his needs and what you're doing and what you're giving him. It's either it might be information or the product itself, but then he feels like you understood him, and that's very important.
Yeah, and I mean you can do that like for different reasons. For example, you have a new product coming out, so you have a product launch, and I mean you created a bunch of different personas. Let's say you as a company, you have like 4 different personas, and you work with them, you create your content, your campaigns, for example, and then you have a new product launch. And the first step is like, okay, how can you prioritize which persona is the most important one? Then you maybe prioritize your persona, and then you do exactly what we see here as a sketch. You can check or have the sales funnel, the user journey, and you create a special user journey for those different personas in context of the product launch. So you ask yourself, okay, how can we create awareness for this persona, and how can we convince them to buy our product and not the competitor's product? And what kind of information do they need? Where do they need it? How do they need it? So these are all kinds of questions that we already answered within the persona template, but now we need to like put it in the different stages of the sales funnel. And of course, this is only like an example, and this is only one case. You can use personas in different contexts, not only about the user journey, but you could also like work on the user experience. For example, if you work in a service sector, you can do a service blueprint and create a context, for example, or a context where a persona needs to do something in your restaurant or whatsoever, and then you can identify the different pain points and try to work on that. So it's a tool for different stages and for different activities, not only focused on communication, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So we now reached our key takeaways, and that was the end of the presentation. So personas go beyond the demographic data and create a more concrete picture than traditional target groups. I think that we have already
pointed out a couple of times, I would say.
A couple of times. I hope that is clear by now.
Yeah, they are far more dimensional, our target audience, I would say, and that's why they're quite helpful and relevant. And yeah, exactly. They consider not only the demographic data, they consider the needs and the process for example, making a purchase decision for the target audiences. So you know exactly in the end how you can influence the persona, how you can create value, and how you can help the persona.
They make it possible to communicate with and address customers specifically and effectively. I think that point we have also touched more than once. So.
And as I mentioned before, by working with personas, we add value for our target groups and for the business itself, because if we create value for our target audiences, then we are more relevant for them. And if we are more relevant, we have a higher engagement, and in the end, hopefully more sales.
Exactly. Create clusters and use different data sources to make personas as real as possible. So as we just seen in the example of Conrad Carpenter, like the more you can add and the more you can be precise about him, the more you can really kind of get him at where he at his touch points, where he is, what he needs. And what also should be mentioned is that should not be seen as a static document, the persona template, but something that can should always be updated and kept up to time, because market changes, people changes. So the persona should not be seen as once you've created it, it's done. It has to be updated. It has to be kept, kept alive, like through the times. And I mean, you don't have to create a new one, but keep that one and update it and keep it up to time, up to date.
I mean, because at a certain point you start working with the personas, and then at a certain point you know, okay, what kind of, how did I change my communication? And then you see how it affects the communication with, for example, your target audiences, and then you consider or can take into account what you learned. So did the comments, did the feedback change, for example, the performance change, and this is something you can integrate in the, and adjust and optimize your existing personas. And last but not least, personas are a tool, so work with them. Not only develop them and put them in the corner, but try to use them as identified topics for your content strategy, new content formats, use them to create new content topic themes for your strategy, but also for within your daily work. So every once in a while, look at the personas and try to maybe like a challenge how you can improve your communication. And even as an onboarding tool, it's quite helpful for your content creation team.
Right.
Yeah. So we saw, I mean, personas are not quite easy, and it's quite complex, I would say. It's not like framework that you can fill out and then you can work with. No, you have to get to know your target audience and get to know what are the interests of them and how to help them. So I would say, I hope we could show you a little bit how complex it is, but how helpful on the other side as well. And we recommend working with personas. So that brings us to the Q&A.
We have a few questions.
Great.
So let me kick this off by this one. How many personas do you need? That's a good question. I mean, it depends on your business, on your industry. If you're a big company with different products and a very diverse product range, of course you need more personas, because, like, for example, there's someone who needs an iron, the other one needs a dishwasher or whatsoever. You can't say, okay, you need 5 personas and that's it. I mean, you shouldn't have too many. So I would say like more than 20, 30. 20 is maybe far too much, but like I said, it depends on the industry size. But they need, as I mentioned before, they need to be, the segment needs to be big enough for an individual and specific communication. So this is like quite important. If you create the personas, always ask yourself, how's the potential within this segment? And I think this is a good help, I would say. Yeah, I mean, as a bottom line is like you want to reach a big group, but it shouldn't be too that you don't talk to all niche groups, but it should always also not be like too random.
Yeah,
like always in between. So next question is a persona necessarily only one person, or can it consist of 2 or more persons, for example, couple or family?
Also a quite good question. I would say a persona is more like a one-person thing, because every person is individual. Like even in a marriage, people are, of course, like after a while they adapt, I would say, but they're individuals and they have their individual needs and desires, and it's quite important that you stress and focus on those interests and needs. So I would say you have to have one persona and not for a team. For example, also in B2B, you have a buying center, and of course you should like maybe not focus on all the people within the buying center, but maybe on 1 or 2. And they have like I said, different media consumption, different interests, and so you can create different kind of contents to talk to this persona.
Okay, so let me see. I think we have another question. I think, okay, here we go. Is it more, that's also a good one. Is it more important to have a buyer's persona in the B2C or B2B area, or does it not matter which market my company is active in? So B2C or B2B, do you think it makes a difference, or is it more important for one or the other to have a buyer's persona?
I mean, for both it's quite important, I would say. But B2B in general, they have, so the sales funnel, the user journey is much longer. I mean, if you buy, for example, or if you want to buy new software, you have to talk to a lot of people. So it's not only, as I mentioned before, with the buying center, you have more people, you have to communicate, you have to talk to, you need feedback. So you need more information to decide on what kind of product you buy, for example. So as a company, you have more potential to address those needs and interests. So you can create more individual content. And that's why, from my point of view, especially for B2B, buyer personas are quite important and helpful.
So I think, thank you very much for your participation and for all your great questions. We have come to the end of this webinar and we hope you enjoyed it. So thanks very much. Have a great Thursday.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.